Welcome back to Theology Podcast. In our last episode, heaven burned with pride. But today, we turn our gaze to earth, to a garden unlike any other. A world without sin, without fear, without death. And there, in the heart of that perfection, a voice began to whisper. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And when the Creator looked upon all that He made, He saw that it was good. The light was good. The sea, the sky, the beasts, the trees, all good. And at the summit of creation stood humanity, not merely creatures, but children. Adam and Eve walked in the cool of the day with God Himself. There was no barrier between heaven and earth. No shame, no sorrow, no fear. Only harmony between body and soul, between man and woman, between creation and its creator. It was the world as it was meant to be. But in the midst of that garden stood two trees. One, the tree of life, and the other, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And God said, "You may eat freely of every tree in the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day you eat of it you shall surely die." It wasn't a trap, it was an invitation to trust. Because love cannot exist without freedom, and freedom always comes with choice. Let me ask you, if you were there in a paradise so perfect, would you still be curious about the one thing forbidden? One day, Eve walked near the forbidden tree, and there, among its branches, a voice called out, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Did God really say?" It was subtle, not a lie, but a question. The kind that doesn't destroy faith outright, but erodes it slowly, seed by seed. Eve answered, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God said, you must not eat from the tree in the middle of the garden, or you will die." And the serpent replied, "You will not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." That moment, right there, is when temptation first found a voice. It wasn't hunger that tempted her, it was doubt. Not in the fruit, but in the heart of God. The first sin did not begin with rebellion. It began with a question. Does God really want what's best for me? Have you ever asked yourself that same question? When your prayer seems unanswered, when the silence feels unbearable, do you ever wonder, is God holding something back? Temptation rarely shouts. It whispers with logic, not lies. It offers something that seems reasonable, even spiritual. The fruit is beautiful. It gives knowledge. Wouldn't that make me wiser? Eve saw that the fruit was good for food, pleasing to the eye, and desirable for gaining wisdom. Notice that. Every temptation appeals to something good. A good thing, taken in the wrong way, at the wrong time, for the wrong reason. The serpent didn't promise her evil. He promised divinity without dependence. You can be like God, he said. And perhaps the most dangerous temptation is not to become wicked, but to become your own savior. Have you ever wanted control so badly that you stopped trusting the one who gave you life? Eve reached out her hand. She touched the fruit. It was smooth, warm in the sunlight. And in that moment, she made a decision that would ripple across eternity. She ate, and she gave it to Adam, who was with her. And their eyes were opened, but what they saw was not glory. It was nakedness, vulnerability, fear. They hid among the trees from the very presence they once walked beside. And God called out, "Adam, where are you?" It wasn't a question of location. It was a question of love. Where are you when you hide behind shame? Where are you when fear silences your heart? Where are you when you choose knowledge over trust? Sometimes God's most haunting question is the one that waits for an answer we're too afraid to give. When Adam and Eve fell, the world didn't explode. The sky didn't turn black. The rivers still ran. The trees still bore fruit. But something invisible broke. The connection between creator and creation fractured. And for the first time in history, the sound of God's silence echoed through the human heart. Why didn't God stop them? Why did he stay silent when the serpent spoke? Because love never forces itself. Even God, in his omnipotence, allows freedom to choose, even when it breaks his heart. That is the terrifying beauty of love. And maybe that's why temptation is so powerful. Because it takes the gift of freedom and twists it into the illusion of control. When confronted, Adam blamed Eve. Eve blamed the serpent. And the serpent had nothing to say. Because you have done this, God said to the serpent, cursed are you above all creatures, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. This is called the proto-evangelicum, the first whisper of the gospel. Even as he pronounced judgment, God promised redemption. From the very lips that spoke, "Dust you are," came the promise that one day, dust would rise again. God clothes Adam and Eve with garments made from animal skin. It was the first shedding of blood, a foreshadowing of the ultimate sacrifice. He drove them out of Eden, not out of cruelty, but out of mercy, lest they eat of the tree of life and live forever in brokenness. Sometimes, God closes paradise so that redemption can begin. Let me ask you, how often do we confuse exile with punishment when it's actually mercy? When God removes something precious, a dream, a person, a place, is it possible he's protecting us from eternal harm? The story of Eden is not about fruit or trees, it's about freedom and trust. The serpent's voice still speaks, not in gardens, but in minds and hearts. You can define your own truth. You don't need God to be good. You know better. It's the same melody, different words, same tune. The original sin wasn't curiosity, it was autonomy without reverence. To be like God is not wrong, for we are made in his image. But to be like God without God, that is the seed of every fall. Temptation begins where trust ends. And every time we trade relationship for control, we replay Eden's choice. But here's the hope. Eden's story doesn't end with exile. It ends with a promise, a return not to a garden, but to a kingdom. Maybe you've heard that voice in your own life, that whisper that says, "Did God really say?" Maybe you felt the silence of heaven and wondered if you were alone. But remember this, the same God who called, "Where are you?" still walks among the trees of our hearts. He still seeks, he still clothes, he still redeems. The voice that asked a question in Eden was answered on a cross, and the God who once walked with man in a garden now lives within the human soul. So tonight, if you hear that whisper, if you feel that doubt, pause and listen for another voice, the one that calls your name, not to condemn you, but to bring you home. Thank you for listening to Theology Podcast. If this reflection touched your heart, share it, because sometimes the smallest seed of truth can grow into something eternal. Join us next time as we follow the story of humanity's exile and the mysterious mark on the man who carried sin's weight first. Episode 5, The Mark of Cain, Justice, Mercy, and the First Blood. Until then, keep seeking the voice of truth, even in the silence of the garden.